Ladies and gentlemen of the media, thank you for your patience. We apologize again for the late start. To my extreme left, I have the former leader of the Alliance for Change and co-founder, the Honorable Kemraj Ramjatan, Member of Parliament. Next to him is present leader, Mr. Nigel Hughes, and to my immediate left, Miss Laura George. Miss George was introduced at a prior press conference as having joined the cause of the Alliance for Change. We are expecting Party Chairman Mr. David Patterson. We will start with a statement by Mr. Ramjatan, followed by a statement by Miss George, and then one by Mr. Nigel Hughes. Ladies and gentlemen, let me hand you over to Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan.
Thank you very much, members of the press. I have a press release on the newly attempt at a cybercrime legislation from the PPP government. There is no doubt that the use of the internet has created a platform for a massive increase in disinformation and fake news, of course, notwithstanding that it was and has provided for a plurality of voices and access to information that was not there before, and a wonderful takeoff for activism of all sorts by ordinary people. But its capacity for disinformation has created problems. As per a discussion paper in the Council of Europe has stated, it can serve to manipulate citizens, create distrust in international rules and norms, and institutions that have democratically agreed on certain strategies. It can also disrupt elections and fuel disbelief in key challenges such as climate change, unquote. The AFC urges that there not be a haste by the PPP government in its attempt to counter disinformation by introducing legislation which criminalizes behavior online. Freedom of expression and freedom of conscience can suffer. There must be a cautious approach taken in moving forward to avoid censorship and restrictions on legitimate content. Being aware of how democratic centralist the PPP is, the PPP's criminalization of disinformation can be used against criticism by the opposition and dissenters. It can further cause self-censorship, erode press freedom, and the publication of legitimate opinions. The United Nations has not yet agreed on substantive cybercrime provisions. Its members are still negotiating. A UN convention is expected to be finalized and adopted in the General Assembly in 2025, and then Guyana will have to ratify. The haste with which the AG seems to want legislation when there is yet no approval of the United Nations Convention on this specific matter is then rather suspicious. The AFC urges the PPP to bring on this important matter preferably a green paper, and thereafter must allow its Law Reform Commission to state its position on such a matter. Thereafter, this legislation should then be sent to a special select committee to scrutinize thoroughly any attempt at criminalization of activities on the internet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the media. I also wish to inform that we have joining us online Mr. Dr. Vincent Adams. So he will be here in case we have any questions. I now turn you over to Ms. Laura George. Thank you, please.
Oh, sorry. My apologies.
Okay.
Excuse me. Thank you, Beverly. Good afternoon, everyone. I wish to read a very brief statement, but which can lead to, or which covers, or which should cover, huge findings of how the current administration discriminates or practices discrimination on indigenous peoples. The Alliance for Change, headed by a leader of the AFC, Mr. Nigel Hughes, made a few community visits to the Upper Mazaruni Region 7 and had some engagements with residents in Region 9 between the dates of 11 to 16 and 20 to 23 August, respectively. Team AFC was horrified that in spite of its support to pass and approve national budgetary allocations at the level of the National Assembly, that actual implementation to support indigenous communities are still largely lacking in efficiently meeting their needs. The media carried information gathered firsthand, for example, by the team, of how more than 300 children of the combined nursery and primary school children in Philippi Village have to use pit latrines in this era. This is a major health hazard to the children and community at large. We are aware that no child in Georgetown or no school in Georgetown have children using pit latrines. So then in this era, if it is not discriminatory, then tell us what this can be. Furthermore, the proportion of teacher to children in the communities that we engage with is daunting. We have received reports that the DC Caesar Fox Secondary School in Warramdon Region 7 and the St. Ignatius Secondary School in St. Ignatius Region 9 have overcrowded classrooms and dormitories. We are aware that legal requirements of report submission by head teachers would carry these information and recommendations, but have been met with only minimal responses over the decades from the administration. If Guyana is to meet its sustainable development goals of quality education, among other goals, we need to act quickly on enhanced infrastructural development, increase the number of teachers, these are trained, qualified teachers, begin STEM programs in schools in the hinterland, and efficiently install internet connectivity in the schools and the communities. Partnership building and collaboration is essential. The AFC calls on the constitutional bodies, such as the Commission on the Rights of the Child, Indigenous Peoples Commission, and the Ethnic Relations Commission to take proactive measures to help in erasing these discriminatory practices and work towards eradicating poverty in the hinterland communities. These should come from visits that they should be making to communities and reports that they should be submitting to the Parliament, to the National Assembly. The AFC calls on the PPP government to display maturity and take responsibility and accountability for deficiencies, just the part that we have, but among others, and work towards peace and trust building. Communities and other residents decried dilapidated infrastructures of government, other government buildings. In health, for example, they also lamented shortage of drugs in these times of outbreak of dengue and malaria, in spite of repeated requests to the regional health officials. For example, in Philippi Village, health personnel reported that they would make a request of about 6,000 malaria drugs, but they would receive just about 4,000, and they are forced to treat residents or patients for malaria and have to really shortchange or have the lack of proper medication going to patients. This isn't healthy. This isn't helpful for communities. It is, again, a discriminatory practice. In addition, the team found that climate change impacts have severely affected food supplies and therefore food security in the communities. This is why Indigenous peoples' right to decide on what source of funding to communities and what amounts must be given or be taken must be respected. For example, we saw in a show of arrogance President Ali declaring the amount of allocation from carbon credits funds to be made to the communities. There again was no consultation on what the communities can decide and what money should go towards communities to support their priority developments. Last but not least, I just wish to point out that it was reported by residents and other leaders that the much hailed Community Support Officer Program, the CSOs, are being used for political purposes by the administration. For example, they were brought out to what turned out to be the PPP's PYO youth camps when they thought they were being brought to a government's youth camp. It turned out to be one where they felt they had no choice but to sign up the party's membership forms. This blatant coercion of the PPPC to manipulate indigenous youth who do not have proper access to information to empower them on decision making and the right to choose must be strongly denounced. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Laura George. We will now go to the leader of the Alliance for Change, Mr. Nigel Hughes.
Good afternoon, members of the press. I am sorry I haven't been here for 2 weeks, but as Laura has indicated, I was traveling in the indigenous communities, both in West Guyana in the Upper Maz and in the South on our listening and grounding tour. I want to start with the indigenous communities, and Laura has touched on some elements of it. I noticed the headline in today's Stabrook says that the president orders immediate intervention after poor showing at CXC Mats. We welcome that and we think it's a good initiative. However, we urge the president at the same time to look at the glaring imbalance between the results at CXC in the coastal communities and those in the hinterland and riverine communities, which translated mean the indigenous communities. It is clear. Sorry, I'm not sure what happened just now. I was speaking about the president's intervention in mathematics that is captured in the headlines of today's Tablet. We want to urge the president that in addition to that, there is clearly an absolutely awful imbalance between the results in the coastal areas and the results in the hinterland community in relation to CXC. Going back to 2022, where Guyana topped the Caribbean, with some students getting 24 A's and the hinterland and riverine community having none, we believe that this disparity continues, and the disparity discloses, I dare say, an apartheid in education, in which the indigenous community clearly are losing. They're at the wrong end of that stick. And therefore, we believe that there needs to be an immediate intervention in relation to the quality of education that is given to indigenous communities. This is not a question of building schools. This is not a question of running into indigenous communities and saying that I've just spent $400 million on a school, the construction of which is a separate issue, which quite often is second rate, but that's not the issue. It is clear that the quality of education that is being given to the indigenous peoples of this country is second class compared to the people who live on the coast. This cannot be allowed to continue, and I believe that all the empirical evidence discloses that it is a crisis and it requires an immediate intervention by the state to ensure that the quality of tuition in the hinterland community and the riverine community is drastically increased. That means we have to have more qualified teachers there. We have to make sure that the members of that community, the teachers who are members of that community also get the best quality education that will allow them to return to their communities to teach. So, Mr. President, while you're dealing with maths, I would say equally important is deal with the discrimination in relation to the quality of education received by the indigenous community. The second item I'd like to briefly address. was the headline by the president or the statement by the president that he was going to dismantle the drug gangs. You would have to be living in Wonderland to take that statement seriously. What is he going to dismantle the drug gangs with? I am sure when the heads of criminal enterprises in Guyana meet and they hear what the president says, they must have a good laugh. Because the president has not been able to dismantle anything looking like a drug gang unless the United States of America provides assistance. We've had 2 submarines here and almost $250 million worth of narcotics found in this country. And none of this was detected as a result of any domestic law enforcement agency. So it must mean that it is clear that the ability to locate large quantities of narcotics, the ability to locate the equipment that is used to convey these large quantities of narcotics overseas, that it is clearly beyond the capacity of the Guyana police force. So for the president to suggest that somehow he's going to go after the drug gangs, if he can't even find the drugs, what is he going after the drug gangs with? The president couldn't seriously expect the people of this country to take him anything remotely close to seriously when he's saying that. In addition to which, there appears to be a continued eradication of trust and confidence in the Guyana police force. And I will touch on just 2 particular incidents recently. There clearly is a suggestion that a relative of a high-ranking police officer had over $500 million in her account, and she's connected to a police officer. Nothing has come of it. In relation to the shooting outside of Palm Court, the Fagundes shooting, which must be now a year and a half old, 100 yards away from the president's residence, there has been absolutely no progress in relation to that. So, insofar as the capacity of the Guyana police force is concerned to solve anything looking like a major crime, they clearly have demonstrated that they do not possess the capacity. In relation to the Orrin Boston matter, Boston got shot in his bed next to his wife. They've charged a man with having shot him. But the more important question is, how does a squad leave Georgetown, travel to Essequibo, go to Dartmouth, shoot a man in his bed who has no criminal record, has never been a suspect in any criminal activity, and up to now we have not received a single report on who ordered it, on what basis it was done, and what was the criteria for it. Clearly, if it was an error and they targeted the wrong person, they should come out and say so. If this was something other than an error, then there ought to have been an investigation which disclosed what led to this special squad leaving Georgetown. And in relation to the commitment of the president and the present government to the question of solving crime, we would like again to repeat our call for the implementation of the Protected Disclosures Act of 2018. That act was intended to establish a commission to which various persons can make special protected disclosures, whistleblowing as it's commonly called, since 2018. That was passed during the previous administration. And up to now, that act has not been brought into force. If we were serious about combating crime, if we were serious about people in the Guyana police force, for example, knowing who is providing a cover-up for $200 million worth of narcotics, you would have an act like this that would allow them to make the disclosure confidentially, to the commission or to its agent, so that you can start to get real information. There is nothing that the Guyana police force has done in relation to combating serious crime that leads anyone to have any modicum of confidence. Unfortunately, the consequence of what happens in Guyana now is that most people, if they are aware of serious criminal activity, as I suspect the villages around the area where the cocaine was found are, they would of course hear the aircraft when they come, they would of course hear the aircraft when it takes off. They will not disclose anything, particularly when there are reports in the press that serious police officers have been transferred on being suspicious, on suspicion of being involved in activities related to the presence of this. The difficulty with that is that the more people lose confidence in the Guyana police force is the more the rule of law becomes threatened. And finally, I just want to touch a little bit on what Kemraj touched on in some detail, and that is the whole question of further amendments to the Cybercrime Act. And I think it's important that we look at the origins of the Cybercrime Act, and this is the international treaty. The first treaty on this was back in 2001. It was the Budapest Treaty, and that wasn't a treaty actually. It was a convention on cybercrime. And that convention, and I forgive me for going through this in detail, but I think people should know this, dealt with literally 5 areas. It was illegal access to a computer, illegal interception of information, data interference, system interference, and misuse of devices. Under the heading misuse of devices, it had absolutely nothing to do with the issue of defamation. What the present government is attempting to do is to criminalize defamation. Defamation allows you a civil remedy. So if someone libels you or defames you, you're entitled to go to court and get damages. What the present government is doing is giving a criminal sanction to what in effect was a civil wrong, which you had to go to court. The problem with that is that it now becomes a tool in the arm of the state that will be used to prosecute, stifle, and silence people the government want to get rid of. And there's no better case that I can refer to than the case of Shara Duncan. Why would you want to criminalize somebody because they went to social media and called you a trench crapo? If you are offended by that term, the law provides you with a civil remedy. You sue the person. You bring an action for defamation. But to make that criminal, it means now, one, it gives the prosecution of any of these offenses under the existing legislation a very wide discretion to prosecute anybody. And invariably, this has always been used, as we've seen recently, only to silence people who either criticize the government or criticize the police force. We've had a series of charges against Dion Bascom. We have seen what had happened to Shara Duncan. And in essence, they have now criminalized what for centuries has been a civil wrong. There are very few countries in the world that seek to silence their citizens because they seek to defame. If someone defames you, the appropriate remedy lies in a suit for damages. It doesn't lie in giving the prosecution and the Guyana Police Force, which I just said enjoys an exceedingly sterling reputation, the power to be able to prosecute someone, even if they may not be successful, from the time the arrest and the trauma that person goes through before they get acquitted. They have to spend significant resources, they have to go to court, and they have to suffer the public humiliation of having been charged. So particularly in the light of what has happened under the Cybercrime Act, the way in which it has been deployed, or the prosecution of people by the state has been used, we have very grave reservations, very, very grave reservations about anything looking like an expansion of the cybercrime bill. I believe during the previous administration, when the bill was actually passed, there was strong internal criticism about it. And we believe, and we've expressed this before, that the time has come to repeal several aspects, particularly Section 19 of the cybercrime bill. Any expansion now is a grave potential trespass on the rights guaranteed under the Constitution to its citizens, and in keeping with the thrust of the Budapest Convention from 2001, we believe it should be limited to those areas. It should not be used to prosecute defamation. The other difficulty with Guyana is that given our very, very fragile and fractured state here, anybody that says anything that may remotely be interpreted as causing concern can find themselves charged for cybercrime because it's very subjective to the victim and does not provide the protections to the of fair trial and due process to the persons who are charged. And with that, I want to thank you for allowing me to present. I believe we have Mr. David Patterson and Dr. Adams, who will.
Dr.
No,
Adams,
David has
are
no
you
statement.
there? Dr. Adams?
Yeah, Bev, I'm here, I'm here. I'm
Okay.
here, Bev.
Do you want to add anything at this point, Dr. Adams?
No, I'll wait for the question, except that, I just wanted to say a little bit, if time would allow, about
Please
this
go ahead.
PWSI facility at Coverdale that has been in the news here recently, and justifiably so. Um, and of course, what has been happening is that all the bullets have been pointed at PWSI for various reasons, again, justifiably so from the residents of the community. And I just want to say that the AFC stand with them for standing up for their rights as citizens of that community. I think the big question that we must ask is who is really responsible for this positioning of the waste that comes from those FPSOs, and it's unquestionably Exxon, but fingers seem to be pointing only at PWSI. When I went with the past administration, the coalition government, when we were in office, I remember at the EPA, we told Exxon in no uncertain terms because what they were doing before was just handing off their waste, generating it, and handing it off to the treatment facilities such as Tiger Tank, which was the main facility which is similar to PWSI. They were handing it off and washing their hands from it. And we said, absolutely not. You are responsible by contract. You're responsible for that waste from cradle to grave, meaning from the time you generate it, from the time it's final dispositioning, after treatment, etc. They agreed to that. We wrote what is called a cradle to grave plan, and left it there, and apparently just as how this administration has been doing, they threw it aside, and now they've got their friends and families giving this company, for example, $214 million to set up this facility, and there are all kinds of questions that have been raised in the media. So I just want to bring that up, that it's not only PWSI. We must hold Exxon accountable for the disposition of this waste through treatment and disposal of the final residues as for the contract. They're responsible. Not only it's PWSI. PWSI is only a subcontractor to Exxon. We have no contract, meaning the government has no contract with PWSI. We have a contract with Exxon to disposition that waste.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just
Dr.
wanted to add
Adams.
something.
Yes,
Sorry,
please.
sorry. And please forgive me. I wanted to add that the Attorney General has said that the amendments have to do with social media. This is the amendments to the Cybercrime Act. However, the proposed amendments that are being discussed for the new international convention deal with the following: child pornography, child exploitation, grooming, non-consensual release of intimate images, and money laundering. So the version 2 of the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime has nothing to do with social media. So where the Attorney General is attempting to suggest where they want to make changes to the Cybercrime Act to deal with social media, this is not even remotely contemplated by the International Convention. And it is clear, I think that discloses or betrays the true intention of the government when they introduce cybercrime, social media, that they intend to use this to go after the people who they don't like in social media, who are constantly criticizing them. The international amendments to the Budapest Convention, and forgive me for repeating it, deal with child pornography, child exploitation, grooming, non-consensual release of intimate images, and money laundering. Nothing to do with social media. So it is clear here, not only is the Attorney General being disingenuous, this is actually a rather unfortunate perversion of what clearly is being contemplated internationally as an as an amendment to the Budapest Convention. That was my only addition.
Thank you very much for that.
I just wanted, I did another little short statement on Jagdev saying the corruption under the coalition was the highest ever. Let me just make this point about Jagdev's statement. Jagdev's derisive comments about the coalition government being corrupt is not intended for the right-thinking Guyanese, who in the main know that that is untrue. But Jagdev is having huge problems with his rank and file. And so such untrue comments will strike a chord with his untutored party organizers and members to regain their support. That is his purpose. You see, the belly is moving these fanatical PPPites outwards, and they're shifting out of the PPP. He's trying to pull them back, and so he's going to cry wolf in relation to trying to round them up. His government is integrally syndicated with criminality. We know that long before Roger Khan said he used to do a number of activities for them. Long before Miss Young from that international television's Voice News interview with Sue got so much information which left Jagdeo susuing in his pants. WPS Clive Thomas had done that long time ago to prove the criminal state of the PPP in Guyana. Now it has gotten worse now in government with petro monies. Firstly, there is a signal modus of a distribution of resources from patron to client, with state resources from the coffers going downwards. Doling patronage to buy off potential political rivals are also included. And we know the various Judases around the place. But secondly, too, the reverse is happening where monies are moving up the chain of command in today's Guyana in the form of kickbacks, levies paid to superiors, and purchase for positions. We have what is called unfettered permission to extract resources for personal gain and protection from repercussions. Protection right has to be extended to the people at the bottom who are paying for the top, and that is why you will not get investigations and so on happening. So we see contracts being given to friends and family. The Schoonard Road is one, and pumping station, I think it was the Critic?
Yeah.
Right, yes, that the Public Procurement Commission found totally improper. The PPP government has to uphold its end of the bargain to ensure that its officials are saved. The business mode that their leadership has developed has nothing to do with governing this country. It is remarkably effective in achieving its objective, that is, enriching that ruling clique. And Jagdev should know that rather than talk about a government of which I was a part.
Can I just...
Ladies and gentlemen, a lot is coming out at this press conference today.
I thank Kemraj for reminding me about that outrageous statement by the Vice President about corruption being the greatest in the APNU AFC era. I think we should start and remember that between 1992 and today, some 32 years have passed. The PPP has been in office for 27 of those 32 years. That is 85% of the years between 1992 and now. There has been a single government, 85%, a single government in the People's Progressive Party. Therefore, when we start to ask questions about the transfer of assets from the state to private individuals who support the People's Progressive Party, we don't want to make a propaganda out of this. What we say is, let us have the data, let us have the raw information on all the assets of the state that have been transferred to private individuals during the 27 years that the People's Progressive Party has been in office. And if there were transfers of assets during the 5 years the AP and AFC were in office. Let us compare them, and then we can begin to see who the beneficiaries of those actions are. As Mr. Jagdeo has invited us to address the issue of corruption, he perhaps would like to tell us why within the last month before the 2015 elections, 2 oil blocks, during an election campaign period where the government activity is supposed to be reduced to just running the basics, why 2 oil blocks, the Kanji and Kaichor blocks, were actually allocated. There was no public advertisement. There was no invitation to purchase. There has been no criteria provided on the basis upon which those 2 oil blocks were allocated. Those blocks have since changed hands at millions of US dollars, and these were allocated within a month of the 2015 election. So if we want to have a serious discussion as a country about corruption, which we should, we must be willing to discuss corruption, because the track record that we have got as a country suggests that with the wealth that we have, all that we are going to do is become a rich banana republic. We are not going to achieve anything other than that. We become a rich banana republic with lots of roads, lots of hotels. Most of the citizens can't even afford to survive because of the cost of living. And we have these vacuous discussions about corruption that are not based on any sort of data. The government has access to all the information that can be provided to the public on the allocation of resources, on the transfer of assets, on the allocation of companies. How many companies which have been receiving major contracts in road construction have a track record of being more than 20 years old or 10 years old? In the Schoonard example, the company that won the MP tab completely disqualified every single other competitor and bidder for that contract.
26
and
of them.
26 companies, including the most qualified, some of the most qualified contractors in this country, disqualified, leaving one company only, and then that company, their bid is about $600 million over
and
the
above.
estimate, the engineer's estimate. Do you understand the scale of absolute, I want to say, unusual conduct that is taking place? This case, they completely eliminate 26 contractors, several of our best and brightest. And the contract is awarded at several $100 million over the engineer's contract. And then you want to come and parade to the public that this is a sign of development. Look at the road, look at the lights. Well, of course, if you gave anybody $600 million more than the estimate that the engineer did, they could put up a lot of lights. They will give you something looking like a road, but exactly what it is. And we have as a country to start locating our discussions, not in the realm of the emotive, not in the realm of propaganda, but let us come to the area of data and information. And finally, last year we spent $1 billion from the National Resource Fund. That is no mean sum.
That's US.
Even in the United States of America, $1 billion is serious money. Can you identify one significant project that you can see right now in this country that says, hey, this is a significant contract? You could build a railroad between Diamond and Georgetown for less than half of $1 billion. You can find transportation solutions for less than $200 million to deal with the crisis we have. We have an incomplete bridge, and we have the promise, the absolute promise, that future projects of significance are not going to be subject to feasibility studies. Yes, we are all happy that there'll be no tolls to pay, but what is the price of that? And where does that fit in the development plan? Where was there a discussion that, look, that the bridges over our major rivers are going to be toll-free? When was the National Assembly invited to discuss this as a proposal? So yes, you may have grand vote-getting gestures, and I would like to commend the editorial of the Stabric News. I think it was sometime last week, because at the end of the day, whether you are wealthy or not, your ability to sustain yourself depends on locating whatever you do within the realm of financial responsibility, fiscal responsibility, and feasibilities. And the feasibility study is not limited to numbers. The feasibility study would take into account all the developmental plans that you have. And what do you lose? The bridges and the tolls will run you to more than 1.5 billion US dollars. And we still have today teachers that we are refusing to pay. We still have today people who are struggling with the cost of living. We still have today people who are not going to be qualified to be able to get jobs. And we want to go down the line of this rhetorical abuse, as if we are possessed of no brains or as if we are possessed of no ability to think. This is all the Emperor's New Clothes revisited.
Thank you, Nigel, for that addition, that second edition on another issue. Ladies and gentlemen, there have been quite a few matters raised here at the head table by Mr. Hughes, Ms. Lauren George, Dr. Vince Adams online, and Mr. Ramjatan. And so I will now open the floor to your questions. Of course, we ask that you extend us the usual courtesy of identifying yourself and the agency you represent. I see Anassa Williams. Please go right ahead.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Davina Bhagat with Kaiser News. I'm just using my colleague's phone. I think I'd have to pass it over to her as soon as I'm finished here because I think she has some questions as well. But let me just go right into it. I'd like to follow up on something Dr. Adams said. Sir, you said the AFC stands with the residents of Coverdale. Can you say if the party has reached out to offer pro bono services to challenge the matter in court? And following up on Mr. Hughes's comments on MP tab and so on, I wanted to know what is AFC's position as well on the award of a contract to a one-year-old company founded by the former vice president of Exxon to monetize Guyana's gas.
Thank you, Davina. We will take the response from Dr. Adams first, and then we'll go to...
You want me to go first on the,
Yes. Yes,
I've been in contact with Adriano, Thomas, and I know that they've been in contact with attorney or attorneys. I will have to let our attorney speak as to whether whether the AFC was contacted to provide services for that cause. But I know that Adriana did indicate that she's in contact with attorneys. I don't know who those attorneys are.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. Mr. Patterson, will you address the one-year company before your experience?
Thank you very much for that, Davina. You sort of preempted me. Actually, I am compiling some information because I do intend to write to the Public Procurement Commission to ask them to examine this particular contract. I'm also writing to them, even though it's retrospective.
You're not coming through clear, David. Something is scratching or something.
Yes, sorry. I must repeat it. I am compiling some information to write the Public Procurement Commission on the contract for the gas monetization. Obviously, it doesn't sit well, and there's several things that that doesn't add up. I mean, I note how that both Stabrook and Kaichur have been raising all of them. So I do intend to, I'm just gathering some additional information because, you know, as everyone knows, the Public Procurement Commission are not the friendliest of commissions to lodge a complaint. The first question they'll ask me is local standi, but I'll still, and I maintain it as every citizen of Guyana should be able to raise questions, even if you don't directly involved in the contract. So just soon I got the information, Divina, I will write them and I will let you know, release that as well. And I'm also writing retrospectively on the awards of the schooner to crane contract. Once again, I don't expect the Public Procurement Commission to be forthright in that, seeing that I have several complaints before them, and I'm still awaiting a formal response. But yes, we do intend to do something on those two matters, and I would say within the week, before the next week, hopefully before our next press conference, I'll be able to address that.
It reminds us, Davina, about the FIP Motilal contract to build roads, and he ain't got no company to build roads. But that is how this government operates, and then they have the gall to state that we were corrupt. They're the ones that are corrupt, and these things will bring that corruption out.
Thank you, Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Ramjatan. I will go to Crystal and then Mr. Antonio Day, followed by Mr. Adam Harris in that order.
Ms. Beverly, just before you move on, and we can barely hear you. I think it's an issue with the mics or so that may need to be passed over. But just before you go on, two other quick matters for me, please. Government recently published its mid-year report. Can the AFC give its position on the performance of the economy during the first half of the year? And finally, given the number of discoveries in the Stabroek block, can you say what is the party's view on the 20% portion to be relinquished next month by Exxon? Thank you.
The relinquishment.
The relinquishment, I would obviously prefer Dr. Adams to address that, the relinquishment. And on the mid-year, we are still to give a full report on it. Obviously, we know certain areas that everyone knows that are dung, sugar, 60% dung, and there's no sign of recovery. Gold. I mean, all the traditional, I mean, of course, they said the non-oil sector grew by 12%. I mean, but we have to interrogate that more. I mean, because obviously, I know construction played a great role in that 12%. But we'll issue a fuller release, I think, within the week, interrogating it. But we are concerned about the dominance of the oil and gas sector in our economy, 66%. We obviously have to do more to ensure that what famously is called the Dutch disease does not occur. We also have to look at our foreign currency generating industries. You know, despite what the government has said, there is a tremendous strain on foreign currency. I mean, they would like to tell you that that the official rate is 205. During parliamentary debate, the last day of Parliament, GPL has officially said that they're buying fuel at higher than the Bank of Guyana rate, which we find strange. They officially said they're buying at 215. So if a government agency is forced to buy FX at 215, what happens to the ordinary person? So we will interrogate that further. And I'd ask Dr. Adams to deal with the relinquishment.
Well, the relinquishment, I don't know what I can add to the fact that the contract requires that they relinquish it after a certain period of time. But remember, it's Exxon who's going to be making that choice as to what they're going to relinquish. And from a technical standpoint, if I'm sitting there, obviously I'm not going to relinquish anything that my data shows that is economic. It has a lot of economic viability. So I wouldn't expect, from the government standpoint, I wouldn't expect that anything that's going to be relinquished from Exxon would have a whole lot of economic, have a whole lot of oil. So that's what I would expect. Now, future technologies might prove otherwise, but for right now, Exxon has all of the data on their exploration data, and they know what the facts are in terms of oil reserves in that area. And If it's not economic, they're going to relinquish it. If it was economic, they would not have relinquished it. They would have kept it and explore and develop.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. We will now take Crystal.
The AFC had promised, sorry, the AFC, very quickly, the AFC had promised to release its oil and gas policy sometime soon. Can you provide an update on that, please?
Davina, what I can tell you is that the policy is well prepared. We just it's a question between our manifesto committee, our PR committee, and it's an internal debate. But we are pushing to have it released. We are ready. Myself, Dr. Adams, Dr. Shamir have already prepared it, and it's just a question of timing. As you know, everything in politics is not just simply technical, and they've asked us to do a bigger release, a bigger, when we release it. So it's there and it's ready, and we'll do that shortly, soon as we all are in one.
Be patient, Davina.
I think Crystal has been patient for quite a while, so please, Crystal, go right ahead. Crystal?
Good afternoon, Crystal. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, sure.
We can.
Go ahead.
You can hear us?
Yes.
Yes,
In
yes,
recent
yes.
time, yes, there are quite a few reports in the media of members in the joint force being caught or involved with narcotics. What are your thoughts on this, and if possible, some suggestions on how this situation can be handled? Secondly, the Minister of Natural Resources at his mid-year press conference admitted that oil could be drained before the 20-year lifespan of current ongoing projects, given the rapid rate the oil is being pumped out. Can you provide a comment on this? And lastly, what is the AFC position on digital classrooms to improve mathematics? Lastly.
Mr. Ramchatan, you want to take it?
Yeah, well, I will. We have to make sure that policemen that have gone rogue in relation to matters of protection and service must be dismissed. And we have to have investigations carried out by police service commissions to ensure that those who are supposed to protect and serve us must do so professionally, honestly, justly. What I see also as necessary is what I've been repeatedly stating, and that is the Minister of Home Affairs ought to operationalize the Public Security Committee of Parliament. That was created to be a congressional type committee like in America, where we can demand and subpoena people to come and answer questions like the PPP did when they were in opposition from 2015 to 2020. I allowed people like Robeson Ben and Gail Teixeira and Harry Gill to come and ask questions of the commissioner, the fire chief, and the prison commissioner. And they did that extensively. As a matter of fact, they even asked to go to see police stations and the very bad state they were in and around the country. All of that was allowed by that committee. Now there is a total shutdown. So we can't call, say, Mr. whosoever is involved in the allegations to come to that committee to answer questions. And so that is where the policy of the Alliance for Change is vastly different from that of the existing government in relation to matters of police scrutiny. And you see, when you have scrutiny like that, it deters, or it has a capacity to deter the activities of police that are so much involved in all kinds of things now. I mean, it was mentioned earlier, big amount of money, even inside. And then we get foolish excuses like that was allegedly made in the press. He recently got married and he got a lot of gifts for his wedding. What nonsense is that? People like that should be, what would have happened to an ordinary citizen had he stolen a $5 million? A little coolie boy or a black boy stealing your money, it's larcenous. But when big money like this is taken, it's economics. It's not criminal. So I urge that we set up the criminal law in relation to this matter.
On the question of depletion, not depletion, of exhaust, the lifespan of oil and gas, we all know that oil is not renewable. And obviously there is a finite amount of volume of oil in each well. And knowing this, we all have to plan for it. Under the coalition, we provided our natural resource fund should take care of the event of our nation at when the oil resources are depleted. We ensured that we had a natural resource fund that had set aside a certain amount for generational well-being. And that's what a responsible government should do. So we know that that oil at the rate that they're pumping is finite. It may be 20 years or less. But if you don't plan for it, obviously, we've seen countries, I think Trinidad is probably our closest example of countries that would have extracted and did not plan for the period in time when extraction is finished. So we had a plan whereby in the event and when the oil is exhausted, there's enough money in the natural resource fund to take care of future generations. The PPP, as you famously know, they have amended the laws and for the natural resource fund so they could take out 98%. 98% of the money that goes into the natural resource fund. So all that they think that our children and our children's children is worth is 2% of what's going on now. Obviously, that's wrong. Obviously, as I said before, how our economy is going, the Dutch disease may be upon us. And if we only leave 2% remaining, we will be worse off than countries which have been afflicted by this disease before. And I think Nigel may want to say something on digital classrooms, but yes. Or Laura.
Let me add to the resource question. From a technical standpoint, and I know, well, of course, there's another issue that we've been addressing in newspapers, especially Kaiser News, etc., with them overproducing, which is a danger in itself to the environment. However, when you make an estimate of reserves, it's a 90% probability that that's there, even a 90%, because geology is not as if it's something in a tank where you've got a definitive volume. You do not know when you start pumping these reservoirs. You start understanding them more, and even the estimate of the volume in the reservoir may change. And on top of that, technology change. As we've seen over and over, we were predicting oil throughout the world to peak since 2015 or something, and we were all wrong. In West Texas, where Exxon operates, where I used to work as a reservoir engineer, we had abandoned that field, but technology has allowed Exxon and some other company, by the way, that's Exxon other biggest field, to go in after abandonment because of technology. So you really can't predict how long it's going to take. For right now, it's just an estimate. That 20 years is just an estimate, and it may end up before the 20-year, or it may go way after the 20-year period. So that's it from the technical standpoint. But I agree with David in terms of the politics and the management for our economic well-being.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. Ms. George will address the digital classroom question. Please go ahead.
So that was a very important question, and Guyana needs to really step up in terms of what do we do in terms of taking our children, the nation's children, forward in math, in English, and other studies. So for a long time, there's this blame game happening where we're constantly reminded that the previous administration had an ICT project and where the funds are. But if you go back a little to probably like 2011 or so, where we had more than $1 billion, an ICT project, a cable project that was bungled, and which could have been a very, very important part of getting our children and our communities connected and enhanced learning. Bring it today to where we have oil and gas, but there is still that talk about, the road building and infrastructure is important. This is where funding, is being focused. But human resource development needs urgent attention. So what do we do? So smart classrooms, but also that must come together with one-on-one contact as teacher-student interaction is important. But where there's a need, for example, in hinterland schools, our children who need to have enhanced learning in math, in other areas, that we must bring up the level of our hinterland communities and the children's learning to meet the gaps that really exist in country as well is really important, and it's urgent. Beyond that, the larger e-governance of Guyana really needs to also be upped and done quickly. Several years ago, there were discussions in terms of how does Guyana go forward and getting our systems, have e-systems installed and all of that. But it's a long way in coming, and Guyana needs to step up. How do we ensure that we can proudly say that these are the steps we took for the nation's children to be competitive and to meet the fast-growing world? We have artificial intelligence and all of this taking place. We need to enhance and support our governance systems, our children. And so, yes, smart classrooms are important. They're urgent, but the investment is needed for example, from oil and gas to ensure that hinterland schools and even schools in Georgetown really are equipped to support our children's needs.
Thank you, Ms. George. If I may quickly add into that, having smart classrooms, I agree totally with everything Ms. George has said. But in addition to having smart classrooms and the whole digital development, what we find lacking, and which has been lacking for decades, is a maintenance program. We spend millions, and now we're going to be spending billions on education. But when we install these classrooms, what maintenance program will be there to ensure that they keep working, they keep running, children continue to learn from one year into the other? And so when smart classrooms are being introduced, it must be parallel with a maintenance program. And going further back than what Laura went to is the need for a curriculum revision. We need to go back to the curriculum. Just recently, I was going through the grade 4 language text. And the first unit talks about rice planting rice. Guyanese people, we don't plant rice, we plant paddy. And so from the get-go, we are teaching our children something that is incorrect. And so we need to get back to the curriculum development work and look at where we are guiding our children incorrectly. You guys need to add anything to that? Okay, so I will go to Antonio. Antonio? Mr. Day?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. I have a question directed to Mr. Patterson. I know that the AFC has stated its position on the Burgess Bridge, which is supposed to be in construction soon by the government. But Mr. Patterson, going back to the issues of procurement, I know you would have been the former Minister of Public Works. What is your position regarding the Burgess Bridge, where the AFC has been clamoring for a feasibility study, and today the state apparently cannot provide that?
Look, Nigel and all my colleagues during the course of this press conference spoke about value for money. But I always tell you, I always say whenever I speak, the devil is in the details. It is my opinion that this is the idea of putting a Berbice Bridge is just simply a smoke screen to give an advance payment, a payout to the current owners of the existing Berbice Bridge. The concessional period has not been up as yet. Right? The concessional period comes up in another 3 or 4 years. The Berbice Bridge revenues per year is almost $2 billion. So if you are now talking about paying off and entering into negotiations with to buy off the bridge, we're talking to a company, and we know who the stakeholders are, will be in for windfall sometime next year on the guise of us to build a new bridge of about $8 billion. We know, and everybody would suspect that if this is done, we know who the best friends of the persons are, we know who they are. And we would know that if you campaign season is coming on, you could connect the dots, Antonio. So this idea just pulling out of the rabbit out of a hat to say we're going to build a new bridge, and they haven't even confirmed that the new bridge will be at the exact same location. They haven't confirmed anything. They claim, and I just shared with the public, and quite a few ago, that the location of the bridge was the least favorable of it. The least favorable. They speak about the monies and those things. Technically, financially, the least favored position is where they built this bridge. But we haven't did, and that study is whatever the Leuchberger study, it's about at least 15 years old. And if it was the least favorable then, it was probably even doubly so now. But we have to look at the idea, what is the reason all of a sudden for you to decide, all of a sudden, they started off, and Antonio, please trace back what I'm trying to tell you. They started saying that they wanted a second bridge, right? They started hinting that about, 8 months ago. They wanted a second bridge. Now they're saying they're replacing the existing bridge. They have not said to you, they're not said to us or the public if the traffic has increased, if something that would have happened would have triggered this desire to get a new bridge. And I can tell you for sure that the traffic count has not increased, because every single year since we introduced a subsidy in the National Assembly, and it has remained constant. The idea was always that and the 10% we give the Berbice Bridge, I think $161 million annually, which represent 10% of all the fares that they would have, and it's been there since 2016. It hasn't risen to 170,000 and those things, which would indicate that the volume has increased. The same amount of subsidy that we had since 2016 remains there 8 years. So the devils are in the details. You will soon hear, in the name of progress and in keeping with this new pronunciation that all bridges will be free, that the government has concluded negotiations with the BBCI to buy out their remaining concessional period for $8 billion in an election period. Connect the dots.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. I see Anassa hand is up. Is this Anassa or is this Naveen again? Before I go to Mr. Harris.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Anassa Williams, Kaiser News. Mr. Patterson, the Vice President recently said that the infrastructure that the government is currently investing in, along with education and agriculture, are part of the plans to establish a post-oil economy. What is the AFC's position on this, and what are some additional measures that should be looked at to have a sustainable post-oil economy in place for Guyana?
Simple answer, you must have a plan. There is no plan. All the projects, and I challenge you, all the projects that they're executing now, none of them are in their manifesto. There's no manifesto calling for a new bridge. There's no manifesto calling for any of the projects they made. There's no manifesto for Conversation Tree and all these, the Schoonard Highway and those things like that. They're literally making it up as they go along. We have called, as Alliance for Change, has called for a 5, 10, and 15-year-old developmental plan with all stakeholders, so everyone can know exactly what is going on. The government just got up and announced it out last year that they're going to build a national airport and Palmaria, just like that. No studies, no nothing at all, and they're going to do. They've announced it out. They're making the New Amsterdam to Molson Creek highway 4-lane. No data that drives well what it is, other than persons that are going to speed on the road faster. You just sit down and you see them. They've announced they're building a stadium in number 19. And great, we do look at that, but is it for what? What particular sport? Our national stadium at Providence is vastly underused. What about putting a mini stadium in every region so that in Rupununi, in Letem, and Rupununi, Region 8 and those things like that, so the youths in there can benefit from it. So the idea that they announced, and I saw today, they thought that the electronic cards are going to be available. I mean, they're a year late, going to be available at the end of this year. There was no plan prior to them coming in and seeing how much money they have and how much money they can give out of under these strange contracts. So when these cards come in, when these e-cards come in, what use is it? I mean, what does it replace? Right now, we have a national ID card, we have an NIS card, we have a TIN number, we have a bank card. All individual cards. When this new eID comes, it's just adding another card to your wallet to carry around, but they've just spent $34 million on it with no plan. So the simple answer to the question is we must have a national development plan. Persons must know, and this is not only for us politicians, it's for the business community as well. They would like to know where the country is going, where they can invest their money. So therefore, obviously, rather than having to go and sit down in a minister's office and he directs them to go and buy a piece of land next to his friend, or tells them where to go, Another issue, just lack of plans, and we're talking about infrastructure. There's the shore base over in Vredenhoop. 2 years after it hasn't finished, only 50% finished. $300 million of our money has gone into that from advance payments from Exxon has gone into that. The Wales Gas to Shore project, no plan. When the gas, if it ever finishes, which we successfully, which we question, how are they going to move the gas now? Not the gas for the to turbine. They said they're going to be producing natural gas, LPG, which will satisfy the whole country. How are they going to be moving that around the country? Transportation. Anything that you see and you hear, they just make it up and do lovely brochures and so forth. But we're absolutely simply like a field of dreams. A man wakes up in the morning and build it, and hopefully the people will come and follow them. So my answer, must have a solid developmental plan.
I just want to add to that.
Just before that, Raj, if we can take Mr. Harris's question, because we seem to be running out.
Yeah, we're gonna. That's right.
Mr. Harris, please go ahead with your question. Mr. Harris.
Yes, I'm here. A very good day, everyone. For Ms. George, are you in a position to say what's the ratio of teachers to students in the hinterland? And Mr. Hughes could help. And one question for Mr. Hughes. How would defamation be dealt with in the future, given that there is going to be this cybercrime legislation? How do you react to the failure of the police to charge people who were reported by supposed members of the opposition for cybercrime? I know Paul Slow had filed the complaint, nothing. Amanzo Walton, they see you had filed the complaint, nothing. How do you react to that situation?
Thank you, Mr. Harris. We'll start with Ms. George.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Harris. So, what happens in the communities is that the population of the schools vary based on the population of the village itself. So, there is no one clear across the board of the proportion. But you would have, for example, when we spoke about Philippi Primary School, that would be one of the more populated villages in the Upper Mazaroni. So you have about 30 something pupils to one teacher. They are still short of teachers. That was reported by the head teacher there, not the head teacher, the senior teachers there. You have the nursery school, which has about 20 something children per teacher, which is just too many numbers per teacher. If we were to look at proportion, perhaps the law needs to change to reduce the number of children per teacher so that there is effective learning. There is more one-on-one that a teacher can focus on helping children in the classrooms who have different learning abilities. So those are the challenges that you find there. So there was also, for example, in Region 7, there was a praise for one particular school called Wax Creek, where the teacher reported that there were 4 students or 4 pupils who wrote the grade 6 exams. And the government and the RDC were proudly promoting that they have more than 75% pass rates. But what they didn't tell us was that there were just four pupils in the classroom. So whilst we can attribute hard work of the teachers to make the pass rate in the school, it really did not reflect that this was just 4 pupils as opposed to a classroom of grade 6 pupils, which is about 50 pupils, and 1 teacher. You have those challenges that are not coming out and making it into the mainstream media. And, that is not acknowledged by government, the Ministry of Education, as being a challenge that we need to address collectively or in a more focused manner by the Ministry of Education itself. So there is no one across the board number, but I can clearly say that the numbers are high. The number of teachers are extremely low. The secondary school, for example, I was told St. Ignatius Secondary School has 1,000 students. They don't have adequate number of teachers. Waramnam Secondary School has over 600 students. They are short of staff by 4 teachers with an additional expected amount of other teachers coming out to pursue further education at the University of Guyana and so on. So we have different factors, different numbers, different regions in the communities.
Thank you, Ms. George. And I will go to Mr. Hughes to answer the last question from Mr. Harris, which just may be our last question for this press conference.
Adam, I think you're asking what happens to defamation. Defamation is always there. You can always sue if somebody says you're a trench crapple, which is what happened before the Cybercrime Act. If you refer to somebody as a trench crapple and they felt it was slanderous, you could take them to court, or they could take you to court, sorry. What has happened now is that we are criminalizing what was just defamation before. Now, that's a dangerous place to get, particularly in an expressive society like the Caribbean and particularly Guyana. So our former leader, who liked to say, if he said haul your fat whatever, that potentially is a cybercrime because, it causes hurt and harm and to whoever it's addressed to. And I'm sure that was not the intention. You see, the Attorney General is trying to introduce social media and things said in social media to create criminal activity. That is not what either convention, either the Budapest or the proposed amendments or updates to it. And it's a dangerous place to go. I mean, in the Caribbean, we forever talking and abusing and saying unfortunate things about people, but to make that now criminal is going to be particularly difficult. And you spoke about a couple of examples there. I just want to add to that. You also had Mr. Blanham, who the DPP intervened and withdrew the charges that were filed. So in the case where private citizens are unhappy with the inactivity by the police and they bring charges, you then have the DPP who is withdrawing those charges. So it's very unfortunate in Ghana that we do this, because clearly nobody's thinking about what kind of society you want to create. We should have a society in which there's a free flow of ideas, in which we talk about real developmental issues, and more importantly, perhaps, the creative energies of our young people are released. So, we can start, if you think AI is a new development, I'm sure we have people that are exceedingly talented in the sciences that may come up with a new form of not only AI, but a new form of scientific development. But if we continue to live in an environment which is repressive, you're constantly looking over your shoulder, then that is going to lead to what we have. And at the moment,
on that note, I think I'm going to have to cut into the response by our leader, Nigel Hughes, and to apologize to all the members of the media who may have questions. At this point, that is all the time we have. So again, Mr. Patterson, Mr. Hughes, Ms. George, Kemrat Ramjatan has already left us. Thank you guys for being here for the press conference. And to the members of the media, thank you so much for waiting. We had a late start, and for being with us here for this time. Thank you.